going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Meltdown, Frost Esports' brand new podcast with me, Llama77, and that guy over there, your boy Q, Mr. Q. How you doing this morning?
Yo, what it do? What it do? Well, I mean, technically it's afternoon now there, but 12:30. No, I'm doing good, man. Middle of the week. We've got a lot going on. We've got a little bit of a lull when you kind of think about the fact that RLCS has this little bit of a window before split number 2. ALGS has a little bit of time before land number 1. We do have VCT keeping us pretty busy, though. You and me, we've been staying pretty busy with some of our other casting, with the high school leagues been keeping us busy. I know you've got some other things. I've got some other things. But fun time, though, man. I've been.
Fun time, fun time for esports. Like we said, we have a little bit of time between the now and RLCS where we're preparing whatever for these next regionals. So that's exciting. But like you said, VCT kind of starting us off. We've got more League of Legends, which I know you're kind of dabbling into, but that's kind of breaking open here soon.
Yeah, we got a lot kind of on our plates, but I think the place that I do want to start, since it's, I would say most fresh, we're like kicking off the off season for RLCS, right? And we just saw within a couple days ago, Joyo leaving Moist, which I don't know if it's a huge surprise after the disappointing split that we saw Moist have. There's some rumors about where he might be going. Nothing confirmed just quite yet. Kind of wanted to get your thoughts.
I mean, I think it's very true. Like you said, they definitely had an underperformance, and honestly, it was kind of funny. My brother came to me and he was like, "Oh, Moist Esports is the greatest in the world, right?" And he's like, "They had such a good performance." I'm like, "Yeah, that was like a year or so ago. Like that was not this year. They actually underperformed." So I think it makes sense, like we talked about, with these roster moves, and especially with an organization like Moist Esports that it's in that kind of weird boundary that you're not a professional team, you are a professional team, but you're under like a content creator. So like you want to perform, but at that same time, you're under that microscope that you have to make changes.
Yeah, I feel like also too, when you look at as far as on the side of Joya, what's interesting, I'm really excited to see where they go, right? Because when you look at EU, like there is definitely like a top 4 that went to land, and then there's kind of a separation behind that. It's not like it's NA where, 4 through like 7 is kind of all like, jumbled up. I think you're seeing where people are going to be trying to put together the next super team, so to speak, right? So that's going to be the big thing for me as far as where does Joyo land, because there's, some rumors out there that saying, linked to going to Oxygen. But I got a question for you. We just saw Carmine Corp have this amazing run, right? But then fall a little short. Do we see Team Queso reform under Carmine Corp? Thoughts?
Oh, I would love that. I think they performed well enough to a bar that like it's a little bit awkward to make those changes. Like if you're a team that made top 8, that even if you didn't make it to grand finals, you hit your marker, you got where you wanted to be as an organization. Do you make those changes with only, like we said, 2 or 3 weeks kind of in this off season? And does that also affect the points that you have? Because I know like you have all these points going in as the top squad. I think it's if you change more than one member, you lose all your points. But
correct.
If you're changing one member, like, is it a possibility you're changing others?
Yeah, I think the other thing too is like when you look back to that Team Queso squad, essentially that'd be switching out a Tau for Joy on that case. And I don't know if it's a situation. I feel like if you looked at the major and thought that a toe, I think it's actually more a toe, right? A toe. I think if a toe had a little bit like of a underperformance in their case, maybe you go, oh, Team Queso, an opportunity, man. But I think we saw that Carmine Corp really was right there. And I think I have to agree with you that you don't disrupt that. But then things get interesting. If Joyo goes to Oxygen, where does Ixo go? Rumors are that they would just essentially swap spots and Ixo over to Moist. But when what was that, episode 4, we were kind of talking about the potential of roster mania, and it's actually been relatively quiet this off season.
I mean, I was kind of expecting it because, like we said, if you change more than 2 members, you lose all your points, and then you're at a significant disadvantage against all these other teams. And if you only change one of those players, we talked about that kind of waterfall cascading effect that can happen. Someone steals one from over here, someone takes one from a bubble team who's moving up to a pro team. Is that pro player going back to a bubble squad? It's a little bit awkward, but we've only had kind of those single player moves, and we haven't really seen that kind of butterfly effect where it creates this massive wave across the entirety of RLCS. Now, I will say, I think it's just that timing because you have so little time between now and
Right.
those regionals number 4 that you have regional 5, you have regional number 6, but I mean, do you really want to give yourself 3 weeks to try and course as a team?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen just across the regions, right? Because even when you mentioned it, it's like one small move here, one small move there. We've had a couple of where it's duos, but it's kind of in that like lower of the pack, kind of looking at Kofor and Money joining Sup, joining with the Oxytocin over there, bringing back Sup, which should be fun, but also toasting Expert going to Incorrect. So when you talk about some teams that have made some waves, but I think it's more about trying to get things gelled in split number 2 and hopefully then keep that core moving forward in the final week. You know what I mean? It's just for me, man. I feel like when I look at, especially like when I went on to Wikipedia, just to be like, has it really been this quiet on the moves? And then you look at, you're like, especially for NA, like, bro, NA, we had 2 squads that were competing, right? At the global stage. That was it. And no one's making moves. It's very strange to me.
It's really tough, and it's kind of that interesting decision of like, yeah, do you make a change now? Do you wait
Right.
until, another month goes by? I mean, again, that's just more price for the organizations, and you have to kind of put some stock in your players. And I always believe in like, you can't give a team like a month to try and prove their worth. You really have to give them some time to, again, merge together, find those play styles that fit them, and find the Rocket League that they want to play, right? So if you give them only this first set of 3 qualifiers and they don't make it, even if they were like top 10, I still want to change the team. Just give them more time.
I feel like that loss of a split is like really getting felt. And it's funny because I feel like when we saw the changes originally, like at the top of the year, everyone thought because of the fact that there's 2 splits, that right now would be absolutely insane with just like everyone making moves one way or the other. And I do think it's kind of turned into the opposite. It's like, well, we're already this far. We might as well, kind of let it cook for a little bit and see if
Yeah.
it's worth keeping together going into, what would be the 2025 year. You know what I mean? It's um I'm not a fan. I gotta be honest. I would love to see, and it's kind of weird, right? Because one thing that you and I always talk about when we talk about kind of like the growing of the esport brand is usually you would like to see some of that roster stability. Um, but in this case, I just feel like we have a lot of rosters that are like one move away. If they were to go out and pick up the right piece, I can just
Yeah.
understand why you don't take that risk. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the risk is large. I also think you have to think about it like, as an organization, you also need to be thinking like, how do we make money? How do we
Right.
survive in the scene, right? Like you can't just, you can sign, sure, like maybe a bubble player that's 16, but are you going to take a bubble player that's a little bit better than a current like, streamer or content creator that might be a little bit worse, but on the team is going to get you so much more traction, so much more views on their content, so much more exposure to your organization? You have to factor in that choice as well.
Yeah, when you mention things like that, I look at orgs like Lotus 8 who like just let go of their
Yeah.
roster, right? Even though they've been performing on the weekly scene, you know what I mean? It's one of those things that maybe you do bring in some people that can at least bring more eyes to the brand and then look forward again at the top of the year to 2025. It's kind of sad thinking about with the few changes that we've had this offseason that the biggest move hasn't really been talked about just because of the fact that it's over in OCE. We saw Scrub leaving Quick Trip Pioneers, been a long time part of that team. What's interesting is, we saw Power kind of put together this little bit of a super team that's really allowed for them to have a dominance over the region, but also to the point where going into the last major, some people were wondering if they were like a top 8 contender, which I think they showed they had the potential to be there, maybe not quite yet there. But imagine in place of Scrub, you put Super Lucky from Chiefs. I do think you have to now at least make OCE a region where realistically they are a 2-team contender.
Yeah.
out of the region. So that should be really fun to kind of see how that roster gel, if that's the case. We don't know for sure if that's the change out, but that's the kind of the rumor would be super lucky to kind of slide in there.
I would love that. And I think also you talk about just the major as a whole. Like we called them like minor regions, of course, because we know the
Right.
dominance of these super regions. But I mean, we saw at the major that it seems like almost every single region is starting to find those pieces, starting to find ways to compete. And I know we said this across all the podcasts, but every region kind of has their different play style and they're
Yeah.
developing that. And it works because it's this different chess game that everybody is bringing towards the major. And some things work, some things don't. Of course, you have to keep trying to, get back to it. You still have 3 more qualifiers to go and still have that little bit of consistency you have to provide. But, going back to what you were talking about in the Nightya scenario with Lotus 8, I know we said it so many times, the Q, please give us Nightya 11 Pigeon for the qualifier 4, please.
It's interesting because it feels like Pigeon or yeah, Pigeon and Scythe, right?
Yep.
Or I mean, which is interesting because I don't feel like we've been seeing the two of them on the weekly scene competing in the same, especially in the same capacity that we've been seeing Nightya and Lev kind of trying different thirds and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see them being what appears to be so committed to playing as a duo for this upcoming season. But hey, man, let it cook. I'm definitely up for seeing what kind of goes down there. But when you talk about kind of the different regions having different play styles and building like their brands as well. I think the building the brands the big thing, especially because right now we saw last split, there wasn't really any broadcast besides the NA and EU broadcast. SSA had one on the African Gaming League channel, but other than that, all the other regions were literally just ran by team streams.
Yeah.
I feel like we got to get those others. Yeah, I hate calling them minor regions, but we got to get those other regions broadcast back. It's the best way to build a brand for the teams. Just to kind of get all eyes on your team, not just the fans who are already fans of your squad,
Yeah.
Because if everyone in top eight's running a broadcast, then no one's coming into your broadcast when you're playing someone else. They're watching their own
Yeah.
team's
Yeah.
broadcast. You know what I mean? So, I feel like it's very important for building those brands. I know that from last I heard, they're still up in the air in a lot of those regions, but I'm just hoping, man, because I know
Yeah.
I can only imagine for these orgs that like the Quick Trip Pioneers, like a Power, who are in these minor regions, you don't even have a main broadcast to help, promote your brand just to the region that you're playing in, let alone trying to build a bigger brand than that.
And quick shameless plug in case any other minor regions are looking for a broadcast. MeQ and Nick are available for hire. So just in case you ever do need that. But yeah, it's a good point. And it is really tough, I feel like, to kind of build that community like we've been talking about. That it's not only building the brand, but just for the region as a whole. Like you want to have the support. It's not only the players, also like the broadcast specifically. You talk about like the casters in that area that may not have a chance other places. This is how they can get their start. And with kind of them being cut out, we're also seeing like other North America, their broadcast got cut in half as well. So, it's tougher for upcoming casters to try and move up and up and up.
Well, I think the important thing too, when you think about outside of, I mean, obviously you and I would love to see more
Yeah,
opportunities for casters, but I think the big thing is the stories being told, right? Because that's what
sure.
drives esports. Yeah, having you know a qualifier every 2 weeks, it gets some sort of advertisement, but it's the people who tell the stories in between and how those stories are told is kind of the big thing, right? So if you don't have something to at least get the ball rolling with that region cover. I mean, even look for SSA just for an example. I think going into the year, even when you look back at the major predictions, they were very much power ranked at 16. There was no questions. Everyone put them at the bottom, right? But SSA has been getting more traction this year. One, unfortunately, with the bad, kind of stuff with the rigging of the brackets and whatnot. But even like Graybeard getting to go on first touch, like by having a little bit of a presence, SSA is slowly starting to grow that
Yeah.
presence elsewhere too. That's something that I think an OCE could really use. Mina for sure could use. I
Yeah.
know that like when you look at, I think both Rule One and Falcons, I think they both have American like English streams. But man, just imagine if Mina had an English stream and I think last year it was Saudi Esports League had
Yeah.
the like regional one, but those both kind of ran concurrently because I think Mina is a region that everyone's kind of interested in.
I think so as well. And it's kind of like, it's interesting that you bring up that point because, like, in League of Legends, it's actually like a huge thing that, like, even at like 3 a.m., 4 a.m., like the China and Korea broadcasts have separate like English versions because that's like the main
Mhm.
dominant language. They translate all the names in game, they do all this special stuff, and it's like 20,000 people watching at like 3 in the morning in these other regions. So I feel like not only, like we talked about, bringing the community together, telling those stories, but allowing different people to be able to access those stories where, usually when you have the English broadcast, there's another language in that country probably. So, if you can get all those different languages, everybody enjoyed, and you get more people involved.
Yeah, building much of a bigger brand for sure. But before we move off of RLCS here, Llama,
Yeah.
have you seen the invisible players in ranked? And
Yeah. No, actually I haven't. I
oh,
haven't. That's
you haven't seen the
good.
clips going on or anything on like social media?
No, I was making a joke. Like, I haven't seen them because they're invisible, but
Um,
yes, I
I feel like
have
you should
seen
do
them.
the dad jokes to me. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Okay, Mr. Dad. You can take all the dad jokes, but yeah, I saw the Hammy Crackers clip, which, by the way, shout out Hammy Crackers. He's kind of insane. He's playing the invisible player, and he aerial sends it in and then bumps the invisible player into the net, which is just crazy. But yeah, this is one of the craziest bugs I think I've ever seen.
It's pretty interesting. I thought it was just a feature because I know, like, I've been going invisible on the pitch anytime my teammates need me in clutch situations, like for a year now playing Rocket League. So I thought that was just normal, but apparently, not. But I'm gonna be intrigued to see how quickly this gets fixed. Apparently, the first like initial like exploit of it was like some like I was hearing on I think it's the Chalkcast podcast. Some like 14 or 15-year-old that just figured it out. And like imagine being that smart at that age and then like being able to cause this much of a ruckus, you know. Well, I guess it's no different than Destroyer 2009 because that would if 2009 was his birth year, that'd make him like 15, 16 too, right? So like
Yeah, yeah,
imagine being
it
a
would.
kid though and causing this sort of havoc. That's absolutely crazy, man. Absolutely crazy. But
Yeah,
Llama, talking about Destroyer 2009, we haven't gotten to talk too much about ALGS. And while we are still a little away from what are we calling it? Los Angeles?
sure. That sounds
Los
good.
Angeles? Yeah,
Close.
before we get into Los Angeles, I wanna dig too big in because I know we're gonna kind of have a little bit more than these upcoming weeks, but I figured this would be a good time for, like, too early of storylines
Oh,
for LAN, okay? But before we get into that, I wanted to ask one big thing first. Do you feel that ALGS, despite the whole Destroyer 2009 thing, we're just gonna take that and throw it out the window. We're gonna take a set, put it in this box, and we're just gonna throw that thing in the ocean. No,
yeah.
but do you feel like ALGS is in a win-win scenario as far as the winner of the LAN? Because I think some people would argue that, they're tired of the Dark Zero TSM storyline. I
Yeah.
think another win by either of them like just really cements a legacy and like that dynasty. And I don't think dynasties are a bad thing for esports. I would actually
No.
argue they're a good thing. Um, but then also in the sense of if we have a new champ, especially a champ from EMEA or APAC North, it's a first championship for that region. I feel like some people, again, if TSM wins, they're like over it, they're done, they're punching the monitors, Cowboy fan at first round of the playoffs every year. Got him. But I was kind of curious, like, what your take was on that as far as going into Los Angeles.
I think there's a lot of good stories. And I think, like you point out, that like for TSM, it's kind of interesting because for me, I was introduced to them before Apex came around. That they
League of
were
Legends.
team solo mid. They were
Right,
the
right,
first
right.
team in League of Legends to put one player in the mid lane. So they had this dynasty in League of Legends, which unfortunately they've left the North American region. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of missing my TSM, but they joined Apex, which happened to, be my favorite game. So I really do like the storyline of the TSM Dark Zero because it's just the dominance that like you said, people don't always like to see the same winner over and over and over, but I feel like that back and forth because they've been kind of battling for titles, going one for one each and every
Right.
time. It makes it a little bit more exciting, but also, as you mentioned, I feel like any other story is good. You talk about another region winning, everybody's going to be happy, right? You talk about either TSM or Dark Zero winning, they can point the finger at the other one and say, "Oh, well, we're better for right now. You got to match us
Yeah,
once
yeah,
again
yeah.
and go in another." And then you also think of like North America specifically. When I think of a team like Disguised, that like they're a team that like has been questioned. You think of like
Mhm.
Designful has been dropped from a couple different rosters, yells at his teammates, Timmy's a content creator or whatever.
Right,
There's a
right,
lot of
right.
good stories inside North America for everyone as well.
So what before we get into some of the good stories then, who's just your favorite to like win the whole thing? Not who you want to win, but if you were a
Yeah.
betting man and you had to put money on the table, not that we encourage that, by the way. However, if there are any sponsors, hit us up. No, um, but if you had to just say, hey, if I had to pick who's going to win, who would it be?
Oh, this one's tough. I think it has to be a North American team. I think North America we've seen is just such a
Biased.
strong. Hey, it's
Also
just such a
based,
strong
though.
region.
Also based.
Okay.
So it's fair. It's fair.
We got all the trophies here. We got all the wins, but no, I think it has to be a North American team. I lean heavily towards Dark Zero just because of their dominance and their ability to figure out the meta. I feel like TSM, like we talked about on a couple of the last podcasts, slow to kind of find their footing in this new meta, in this new patch. For Dark Zero, they didn't really have any trouble and are literally the number one seed for a reason. Now, there are other kind of like dark horses that I would think possibly like from North America that still have that chance where I'm thinking like TSM always have that consistency, like Disguised who was possibly in the winning position at that LAN last year and got ended up like fifth or something as well. I also think of like Cloud9, these teams that just barely made the cusp but are really wanting to prove something here at the LAN.
Cloud9 could be a good one because I think that's one that a lot of people aren't even expecting to. I think when you look at it like even just North America in general, I feel like most people are expecting Dark Zero, Moist, TSM, maybe like an LG, possibly. I'll tell you, what would be fun, I think, and then I want to get your take on this. First off, I'm going to say my favorite right now, I have to agree, is Dark Zero. I think they just look so good in the toughest region. How can you
Yeah.
bet against them, right? And they looked good in the past, but then they added Sykes with Jen
Yeah.
Burton and Hero, and they just looked so disgusting. But I think when I think about like who would I like to see as far as building the esport, building the brand. When you talk about North American teams, I think Legacy. And hear me out. I know that they don't
Yeah.
have like an org or anything that normally has like, oh, we're a fan of this org no matter the game, so we're going to watch. But when you think about generally speaking, that Central American, South American like passion when it comes to esports, it's something that's kind of missing in ALGS right now, right? I
Yeah.
mean, especially they got rid of the South American region as a whole. They're just sending two teams kind of similar to the way that China did last year over in VCT. I feel like when you look at Legacy, if you can get them, which they're already looking solid, like they had a really strong finish to split number 2. You have them hoisting a trophy, taking down the TSMs, the Dark Zeros, and everyone
Ugh.
else. I would say unsigned, but I'm pretty sure that they just got picked up. It just hasn't been announced yet. I'm
Yeah.
curious to see who
Yeah.
they got picked up by. I'm excited to see who, because I do think, man, Yanya, Nizel, Jaguares, I mean, absolute fraggers, the three of them. Basilo's an amazing coach, man. They deserve a good home. I'm gonna be excited to see where they end up. I didn't put it on here. I just thought about this real quick. Wanted to talk about it before I forget.
Yep.
Did you see the news about Virtus Pro?
I think I saw it, but I didn't see who.
So Virtus Pro picked up an APAC South team. It was the old Team Burger Squad, which I gotta
Oh.
say, the Burger Brigade not being
Yep.
there kind of hurts.
Yeah.
Anybody who remembers the old Twitter page was me holding the burger sign at ALGS Raleigh. But to see Virtus Pro coming in, like a big like CS:GO and I think Dota, I think is the
Yep.
other like big organization that they're in. To see them picking up a team of some caliber, when you think Sharky, Pricey, two players who have had experience and performed well on LAN in the past as well. Excited to see that. Want to get your take on that real quick before I forget.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I do have a small tangent. I know, like going off on those today, but my girlfriend's gamer tag is named Sharky, and whenever you look up Sharky on anything, it's like, oh, Sharky, professional Apex player, and she's like, I am professional Apex player, but like, I I think it's good that that team did get picked up because I think they have such a large following behind them. It's nice to see organizations like the TSMs, like the Cloud9s of the world, like the Virtus Pros now, kind of joining into a different esport that isn't their home ground. But to pick up a squad that is so good, I feel like maybe didn't have the performance that they exactly wanted, but has such a strong community behind them. I feel like you're going to get a good response.
Yeah, you're definitely gonna get some fresh eyes on the esport that have not watched it previously, and especially when you talk about for a region like APAC South that needs more eyes on it. Really excited to see. I mean, wouldn't even mind seeing a team like Tom Young Kung also getting picked up. Man, that's some spicy shrimp, I'll tell you what. But also when I think about personal favorites for the esport, I would love to see APAC North get one. APAC North has, I mean, such a big following. Usually they kind of get discredited because everyone goes off of like Twitch viewership, and most of their viewerships on like
Yeah.
Billy and other platforms like that, right? But I look at a team like Fnatic who looked good most of the split, and I would even argue that this year with APAC North, between them and Reject Winity, two squads who both look very dangerous. This could be APAC North's like first chance of getting themselves a title, and to do it right now. And I mean, let's be honest, all eyes really are on Dark Zero and TSM. To be
True.
able to come in and do that would be huge. Also, looking at teams like Aurora, right? To be able to bring one home for
Yeah.
EMEA. And when you talk about, especially with the Grim Griefer coming back, and then to be able to hoist a trophy in the first split, like just imagine this. Again, we're talking about the storylines and the stories that get to be told. Those are some of the big ones I think that really stand out to me.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting as well because you have this kind of EMEA crowd. You have Zephyr who made it up to Pro League, cheering them on from behind. But Fnatic as well, I feel like has a little bit tougher road through the finals, which is kind of an interesting thing to talk about
Very
as
tough
well.
group.
That Group C is going to be probably the group of death. You got TSM in there, you got Fnatic, you have
Usually is.
07 and Elevate, which are kind of wild cards. You have the likes of Northeption and Fury, which again, it's just like crazy big names. Anything could happen. And I feel like that's going to be the toughest group to get out of.
Yeah, and even like the teams that maybe you don't necessarily expect out of that
Yeah.
group come with a lot of experience. I'm looking at teams like in '07 who did finish 5th in EMEA. Nasky always shows up on Landman.
It's
Don't be
true.
surprised if
True.
'07 still ends up popping off. I mean, Legends Gaming, you look at them and go, oh, they didn't, even win APAC South, but dog, Legends Gaming, that they proved that the hand truly was heavy last year at the end of the season. And you know me, man. Them's my boys. Strafing Flame, that's my
Yeah.
IGL big
Oh
dog.
yeah.
I've been touting up him and Player K as a duo for quite a long time. I would love to see them get one, but Group C is indeed going to be tough.
It's going to be a tough one to escape out of. I think it'll be really interesting to see kind of how it shakes up, who's been scrimming, who's been practicing, who's been working the most. And, talking about these stories, which one we're going to get to follow up this Apex LAN. And, I'm excited to kind of see, we saw a little bit of the new changes implemented here with this new patch, with the kind of back half of that split. But I'm really excited to see them on LAN, see what every different region brings to the spice.
So earlier you said that it felt like it had to be a North American team that wins.
Yeah.
But what if it's not? Who would you say is the one team that you're really looking at across the regions? And it could be EMEA, APAC North, APAC South. Like, what's the one team that you say that they could be the ones to do it?
I know it's kind of an easier choice, but I know you already mentioned Aurora and Fnatic. I think these are two teams that are obviously top of their groups. They're going to be looking to try and prove themselves, but also you look at Aurora and it's always like, there is a point about playing competitively, but Aurora just seems like every single time they're playing, like they're having fun, which is like such a big thing when like you can bring in new legends. You don't have to play towards the meta. You can play comfortably in these different legends outside of the meta in your own play style. Means you can build the meta, means other teams might follow you because you are doing new things. So I think that's very huge. And I wouldn't be surprised if they bring a new plan towards the LAN.
Yeah, I feel like those two are definitely the ones I have to lean on. But I gotta say, and one last team I'm going to throw out, and I mentioned them earlier, but imagine the amount of like chest thumping and like pride for the region if Nasky wins for '07.
Oh,
The
man.
farming of impressions on Twitter would be epic. It's another one of those that like maybe not like on the top of people's list of who they're expecting, but that is one of those flip. Man, Nasky would not stop talking until like the end of split 2. It would be great.
I really want to see Disguised win because I know how much of
Another good one though, man.
a memer Designful is. Like,
Oh,
we
it's
have to get
great.
another copy pasta. Lock it in. Leave your emotions at the door. Whatever it is, we need another one.
Man, Designful, another one like Nasky, bro. Like the amount of like banger tweets that would
Yep.
come in the following weeks after being able to hoist the trophy would be phenomenal. I do gotta say in NA, I would love to see Sweet Dreams. I just don't see it. I feel
Yeah.
like I think Funk and Slayer are gonna need some time on land, but I would love to see Sweet Dreams get themselves one, just because that would be oh so cool. But in similar fashion, like we did with RLCS, I want to talk one thing generic more about the game
Okay.
before we move off of Apex here. And I realized I didn't put it in my notes here, so hopefully you saw it in the chat earlier. People losing heirlooms, badges, all of that. Um,
Yeah.
Thoughts?
So yeah, I kind of have a little bit more background in this as well. That it was it was an issue with cross progression. Obviously,
Mhm.
if you're playing on console, playing on PC, there's a thing where you can merge your accounts. Everything goes to one account, and you get all your heirlooms, badges, kills, whatever. And it was an issue where cross progression re-popped up, but this time instead of like giving you stuff, it took away stuff. So badges, pred badges, it was taken away, kills on your kill tracker, levels on your account, and then most importantly, it also took away RP. Like some of the players got knocked down the rank ladder. There was a player that was actually like 15k ahead of everybody else who was reduced to just 15k at the masters level.
Well, I don't know if I'd say that's the big. I feel like the biggest would be the heirlooms and all the
Yeah,
skins and stuff. I saw some
yeah, that's
people
true.
talking about lots and lots of money, dog. I would not be a happy camper. And it's tough because this is on the back of the whole cheating scandal, which was made public with ALGS. But I think a lot of people who have played this season and, are around the community, they'll probably attest to the same sort of thing. This season's a tough season to play Apex.
It is.
It's cheaters everywhere, dog. I don't know what's going on, but then you on top of that, the people who are still loading up your game despite all the cheaters and all these stuff, then they lose like their badges and their hard-earned money that they spent on your game. That's just why. Hopefully they get it like rectified soon. I'm sure they will. Um, but man, talk about unfortunate.
Yeah, well, I actually have a friend named Oxygen Josh who, like 3, 4, 5 months ago, had kind of the same issue. He
Really?
lost an heirloom and it was gone out of his account, and he actually submitted a form and they banned him for it. So, like he was saying, like make sure to submit the form, but also don't submit the form because maybe you could get banned. So, like he lost his whole entire account, and like support didn't even help him out. So
Mm.
I don't know. It's kind of crazy that all this is happening, and like you said, like the player base taking a hit, you losing all your items. It doesn't feel good. At the same time, though, I think they will rectify it, and especially if it is money, like EA is gonna be definitely interested on fixing that as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm gonna be kind of keeping an eye on the developments. I feel like with the money involved, it could be a little bit of a sticky situation if they don't. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
as we talked about, a little bit of a lull until we see qualifier 4 for RLCS. A little bit of time until we see ALGS land. However, right now we are being kept pretty busy with VCT. Actually, right now as we talk VCT, week number 2 in EMEA has already started. What's the color? Blue.
Woo!
There we go. Thank you. They are playing right now, tied up 1-1 against Foot Esports, starting off week number 2. I know we don't talk much EMEA over here. We're mostly talking NA. That was just pointing that out, and y'all know I'm a big Carmine Corp fan, but
Yeah.
kind of want to pick your brain a little bit about week number 1 down here, Llama. Any like big surprises that really jump off the page to you?
Not really. I think Loud losing is kind of a little bit of a surprise, but it's NRG Loud. I think that one is always going to be spicy.
It was the
But
13-2 for me.
yeah. It was a little bit of like I feel like it was just the jet lag, the getting back from land, not that much time to scrim. It's what we always see from professional
Yeah.
teams. So it's a surprise and it's not at the same time. I think like the Cloud9 win, it's not super surprising. The Sentinels winning, they're the world champions. Like, why is that surprising as well?
I gotta say, the Cloud9 Leviathan series, really
good.
good. It's funny. One of my mods messaged me. He's like, "Oh, we're not putting Cloud9 on Fraud Watch anymore. We're putting Leviathan on Fraud Watch." I'm like, bro, after a series like that, you can't put either of those teams on Fraud Watch. It was a banger of a series, which is a great way, honestly, to really start off VCT Americas. I thought the whole week was relatively good. You mentioned the G2 win over EG. I think EG to me was a little bit of an underperformer, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't say like a huge case of it. Like I think everyone kind of expected G2 to take walk away with that. I just I don't know if I would have expected EG only taking 11 rounds.
And it's kind of like the org name, right? You're talking about the previous world champions that obviously they've had some roster boos, they've had some controversy surrounding them, but I feel like their support behind them and the community really did value them as a higher team. But I think we'll have to see. They have some more matches throughout the regular season if they can try and prove themselves. But it does feel like it's kind of the same thing as we saw in the first split, that it's kind of this Sentinels leading with a couple of other like dogs fighting for that second, third place.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see as we go further throughout the weeks. Of course, with the accelerated schedule this year, since they put them into two groups instead of the one, there's only 4 more weeks of play. Super Week will
True.
be in 2 weeks. So we'll have a little bit more to kind of talk about preview and post. So in 2 and 3 episodes from now, we'll kind of have a little bit heavier, more VCT Americas. One thing that was cool, I wanted to point out, just because I am a global guy, I watch a little bit of everything. Was seeing Detonation Focus Me get their first VCT win. Hey, let's
Yeah.
go against Talent Esports, against T1, who I'm kind of surprised if they were going to beat anyone. It was T1. I thought T1 didn't look horrible against Paper X. They played Paper X pretty close earlier in the week, just to kind of stumble against DFM. It was kind of intriguing.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of interesting. We talk about like big names. We talked about like TSM before, but like seeing T1, the greatest League of Legends esports, organization of all time, come in, be able to take a loss. It's tough when you have other greater rosters. You're just coming in to try and pick up one, but I feel like maybe he could have performed a little bit more up to par. And again, it could be just like this is the first game. It's a low sample size. We'll have to see them throughout the rest of the regular season, but to start off with a loss is definitely not a feels good moment.
Yeah, speaking of other losses, the one that I'm gonna be really paying attention in one other region, and I'm done bouncing all around. Fnatic. Fnatic. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't. So Lotus looked really good. 15-17 pushed it to overtime. They really underperformed on the icebox, which kind of allowed the momentum to roll into Lotus, which I think otherwise they would have been fine. But I did hear rumors that they had been dealing with like a stomach virus or something like that in the Fnatic house. So this week they played Giants, and I feel like I feel bad for Giants because they're going to be the ones who pay for it. But Fnatic do have to come out and make a statement this week in
Yeah,
EMEA, not just to the region, but they had to prove a statement to themselves. They've started off now 0-1
it's true.
after failing to make the plan at Madrid. Man, you've got 5 weeks. You got to turn things around in week 2, big dog.
Got to do something very quickly, like you said. You have very limited time, very limited games, and not a ton amount of time to try and practice and work things forward. And I feel like we kind of got glimpses of that from the PaperX coach in all these interviews. They were like, through the regular season, we don't have time to like even prep. We're just like hoping that our solo performances work out well enough. And like it's the exact same thing. You only have 6 weeks. If you lose like 3 or more, like it's not gonna be a fun scenario for you. And then you're also talking about what happens after. Like if we don't perform in these 6 weeks as a team, as a player, am I getting switched out? Am I, in that break between land? Am I going to a different team? Am I looking for a new home? Am I losing my living because I didn't perform in these 6 weeks?
It's definitely a lot of pressure, man. So when we look at week number 2, Llama, I'm kind of curious.
Yep.
Let's stick to NA, or not, sorry, NA. I keep doing that in VCT. Let's stick to Americas.
America.
I do know that that's where like a lot of our fan base is, even though y'all know I'm going to give you a matchup or two to watch elsewhere. But for VCT Americas, which matchup would you say, if you could only watch one this week, this is the one?
Okay, there are a lot of good matches this week, I do gotta say, but I think the G200 Thieves one is the number one. I think this is two teams that 100 Thieves, they did take a loss in the first week, but I believe it was to Sentinels. So, the world champions is what it is. But I think these are two teams, like we said, that are fighting for that second, third, fourth spot. If you win this matchup, it makes it a lot easier to say, okay, we lost to Sentinels. If you are 100 Thieves, I mean, if we lost to Sentinels, but we can beat these other top tier teams that already have a win.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be that one. Or for me, honestly, just tune in on Saturday, because the
Yeah.
one after that too, Sentinels versus Leviathan,
Mhm.
especially because Leviathan's already dropped the game to Cloud9, and you were
True.
mentioning earlier, you have 5 weeks, 6 matchups. If you lose 2 or 3, you're already in trouble. So at
Yeah.
the risk, after playing, the kickoff champions of Sentinels, you could already be 0-2. And this Leviathan roster, with all the changes they made in the offseason, having a lot of hype around them, having a lot of high expectations.
Yeah.
Um, and It don't get easier from there, big dog. You look at Super Week, the week right after that, the first matchup that they play NRG. So like this game here is either turnaround time or it's like the split's almost about done. It's kind of where it's at for Leviathan. It's crazy to think that that's where they already are in week 2.
And it's where a lot of teams are. It's like we said, like you face a couple of these losses. It's unfortunate, but it's how the scenario works here with the Valorant. You only have those few weeks to make it happen. So it'll be really exciting, though. Again, you have your fate in your own hands at this point. If you win out, you're probably going to be okay. But easier said than done from us up here. I do got to ask you, did you? I know we were talking about the Apex stuff and all of this, the Rocket League bug. Did you see the DDoS attack on the League of Legends T1 team?
No, I did not. Was this like during like a like live match?
No. So basically, they had a week of preparation for their upper bracket matchup, and they were like, "Well, we couldn't play any scrims at all because like their internet got DDoSed and all of their scrim information got leaked." So like. They lost that matchup the weekend, and like Faker was saying like, oh, it's not because of the DDoS, and like was staying very humble, but like clearly you could tell the team was underperforming.
That's rough. But what's going on with esports right now with all these like wild events going on? And it's across like multiple leagues and stuff as well. Speaking of wild things, where the wild things are. Let's take a step back from the pro level. Because I know you and I are just junkies of esports in general.
Yep.
And we've kind of talked about just the collegiate level. I feel like we've talked about it in the past on the podcast, more about like what that path to pro should look like. But in the last couple of days, we've got a couple of programs making some news, Llama, and not the good type of news.
No, we got a couple teams that are their players are accused of like smurfing, account sharing, doing a bunch of different stuff that is illegal under the collegiate rules, and those teams have been effectively removed from these collegiate leagues until they can prove themselves back towards it. So how I kind of view it, again, I'm very involved in the collegiate scene. I kind of see two sides to this, that not only I see it first focusing on the issue itself, that yes, the directors were the ones that like were at fault. It really sucks for like the players that are on scholarship there to compete, that it's going to fall back on. But at the end of the day, it is the director's fault, and the school does have to be punished. And then at the other side, I'm also seeing like NACE wasn't the most reputable collegiate organization. And, my squad, Ohio Northern, they're like, okay, we're staying away from that. And then once they see this kind of decision being made, they're like, okay, we see you're respecting rules. We're actually going to join back.
Yeah, so it's definitely good to see like the ship getting set correct. You know what I mean? Because I feel like this has been a kind of a hot topic. At least I know I've noticed from following a couple of different esports directors and stuff like that over on the Bird app. The topic of even just remote students competing, right? Because of something like this being able to happen, and not saying that was necessarily the case here. It was more of just like the account sharing, like you were talking about, but
Right.
it leads to all these other things. And I noticed a very interesting take was talking about how even though esports is more popular now than it was a decade ago, and I think
Right.
everyone can agree that when you look back to when it was very much in its grassroots phases, it was those bigger schools that were still competing at the highest of levels. And whereas now, it's like you look at the top of most of these leagues, and like I'm not trying to knock Northwood, but like what's Northwood do besides esports, dog? You know what I mean? Fisher College, what do you do besides esports, my God? You know what I mean? And I think we have talked about in the past where it's like it's nice to kind of see some of the more traditional like collegiate conferences coming to play, like the Big Ten Conference. I think I also saw the Big East did their first year this year as well. So like seeing stuff like that starting to develop, but this ain't it. You have it with like two programs like in a matter of like 3 or 4 days. You have Fisher College and then the University of Buffalo as well. For the same sort of stuff, and it just sucks because I feel like collegiate esports has so much potential right now. You see how much money is being put into it across the board from all of these universities. But the only time you ever hear news about it is news like this.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I can literally tell you from my personal experience, like this is what the colleges are using for a lot of their recruitment. Like they are a smaller private college. They're definitely more expensive than some of the bigger ones, the more public ones that at Ohio Northern specifically, we always gave these numbers to the president that football, well, it was big, you know, it was Division III football, but it was still a big thing because sports are a big thing. Only had a 7% retention rate from when a student started as a freshman to when they ended as a senior, where esports had a 93% retention rate. So we're like, if you can give us money, if you can keep this program going, if you can build it up, then this is what can give back to your school, not only students, but building a community where at Ohio Northern, there was only 2,500 kids. And every day you'd see like 300 on the quad. Half of them would be wearing the orange and black of the esports stuff. And it was crazy to see that. But the other problem is like, do they actually believe in that? Because I love the program there, but the president just cut funding again. They cut when I left from 9 programs down to 3 programs, and then just cut our director, just cut his assistant. So I know as well. I was talking with another collegiate player. I'm not gonna mention his name just to keep him anonymous, but he was talking how like the school's increasing prices by 15,000 between this year and next year, where he's like, we're not on full scholarship. We're not one of these big universities. Like we're wanting to play. We came here to play, but we just can't
go into that sort of debt just to play, you know, Rocket League or something like that for a couple extra years at the collegiate level, which is really tough, man. I feel like that we'll definitely see there becoming a more norm of that. You know, obviously you and I work for a like state funded program up here in the Northeast when it comes to like the high school level. So there's definitely like more money getting put into the industry. I just feel like we still are going to continue to see this adjustment over the next 5 to 7 years or so, maybe more 7 to 10 when we talk about more like the scholastic level versus like the professional level. Just because I do think there still has to be more of like the acceptance there, but we're definitely seeing it more, which is really fun to watch. I feel like every year, like the start of school, I love getting on Twitter because I see all these different schools that are like showing off their new esports caves and like showing it to all their players and stuff, and just seeing all the money and all the care that's being put in by people is just so much fun to watch. I want to see the needle continue to get moved because I feel like we're still so far from where it could be.
Definitely could. And like I said, it's that disconnect where like we have the passion. We know like people that were like passionate like going up right now. The directors are young. Like no offense to them, like they're like 25 to like 35. Like they're not these like older people that have been involved in the college for so long. So you see like the people like the presidents, and you see that disconnect where like you bring in somebody who's like mathematical focused, and you're like, okay, what is esports actually doing for us? What is it actually helping? Where you also have to realize as well for the players that like you think about like an NBA player, like an NFL player, that like very few, like the top 1% are going to make it to the collegiate scholarship level. And then it's like 0.00001 are going to make it to that professional level. And it's kind of the same thing with esports, that we have to use the scholastic level to not say, okay, here's your, yes, there are opportunities to go pro, but it's all about just like the learning, the communication, so many benefits of the video game specifically that you can build on outside of it.
Literally all of the team fundamental and team chemistry and working as a team and learning how to take coaching, all the stuff that's from sports other than the literal physical part, even the mental demand, it's all there in esports. It's kind of crazy to think that we're still so far removed at some other, you know, at from some generations kind of grasping that concept, because I do agree. I think you can do the same thing at the scholastic and, you know, the collegiate level where it's like, hey, yeah, it can at least maybe help you with your, you know, earn a little bit less or save a little bit of money on your education, but you are a student here first. And again, I do think that needs to be the priority. And I think especially more again, looking at things like this, where it's like, what are we account sharing for, dog? Like a trophy that only is going to be remembered more than likely for the next 2 months. Like, no offense to like collegiate esports, you know what I'm saying? But like, there's always the next tournament. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you're a Final Four winner that gets talked about for the next 3 seasons. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I would love to get to that point where esports is up towards that level, but like for Ohio Northern specifically, like it's also like a recruiting technique that like it
Mhm.
helps build the program as well. That it's all that snowball. You can say, okay, not if you walk into an esports program, sure you can see their nice facility, but you look in there like, oh, here's our empty trophy case. We've been playing for 5 years and we've won absolutely nothing. Versus like a team that has wins in different esports, has different programs and valuability. But I also think that like I also, I'm close with the Ohio State director and him specifically, like their program is no scholarship. It is all club
Right.
level. And I think the passion and the grassroots, that's where esports needs to be.
Yeah, it feels like the passion in the grassroots scenes has always been higher and really allows to deliver a better product despite the fact that there's less financial backing, which is definitely a very interesting. Like I think back to like the old MLG broadcast for like Halo
Yeah.
3 and COD and stuff. Like it wasn't anything crazy. They didn't have all these extra promo portions, but they still were able to deliver a very exciting product for the time. So um yeah, I again very unfortunate that we have to see news like this from the
Yeah.
college level while we're trying to build it. But I did kind of want to pick your brain on it regardless. Also, because too, we've already kind of ran through our docket here at Llama. We've gotten to hit, RLCS, ALGS, VCT, talked League of Legends very, very briefly. Collegiate esports as well. Before we get up on out of here, anything else on your brain?
No, I just think it's the point to note for all of this. It applies to every single one of these esports in these situations. One bad drop of poison soils the entirety of the water source. That you talk about collegiate, one bad team trying to, account share, one bad team trying to, snatch players for full scholarships ruins it for the rest. And then you talk about also these other like hacks and other things ruining things for these professional teams.
Yeah, it really is the one, and the one bad can really dilute how much good you have done as well. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point to build on there, Llama. Is always just kind of making sure you're putting your best foot forward. But you know what? As far as for the podcast, I don't want to keep y'all much longer, but I do want to say I hope to catch y'all back for the next episode, man. We've been bringing more content y'all's way than ever over on the YouTube, over on social media. So make sure y'all are getting involved. Every time you see those videos, hit the like, hit the comment, let the videos play through, man. Those are the three things that let the algorithm know they should be putting that, whether it's the clip or the episode or whatever it is, they should be putting it in front of more people. We appreciate y'all. We've been seeing the comments over on YouTube. Make sure you're leaving those down below, helping us out here, man. And so we do catch y'all back for the next one. Don't forget, with everything crazy going on in the world today, be true, be you, be sincere, game hard and love hard. All right, y'all. That's Llama. I'm Q for the rest of the crew to the front to the back. Y'all have a great rest of your week. Peace.